7 years ago, I buried my daughter, or at least I believed I had. From that moment on, every January, I sent $40,000 to her husband, money earned from my small grocery store paid for with endless sleepless nights. I told myself it was for my granddaughter, for my wife who died from grief, for the daughter I mourned every single day. Then, one afternoon at the park, my 7-year-old granddaughter leaned close and whispered, "Grandpa, please stop giving him money. You need to see something." I listened, and everything shifted. What I uncovered turned 7 years of sorrow into something far worse, a betrayal so deep it shattered everything I thought I understood. Hello everyone, and welcome. Before we continue, take a moment to leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read every single response, and your presence here truly means a lot to me. And just a quick note before we move on, this story includes certain elements crafted to enhance storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to names, people, or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing is meant to be thoughtful and worthwhile. My name is Richard Callahan. I'm 68 years old, and for the last 7 years, my life has been about one thing: keeping what remains of my family from falling apart. Every other Saturday, without fail, I take my granddaughter Ivy, she's 7 now, to Riverside Park for ice cream. I always get chocolate chip. She always chooses strawberry swirl. It's our ritual. It's been that way ever since her mother passed away. Rachel was my daughter, my only child. 7 years ago, she was killed in a car accident on Route 9. Her vehicle left the road and caught fire. They told us the damage was too severe for an open casket funeral. We were given ashes instead. What was left of her. 6 months after that, my wife Gloria followed her. The doctors wrote it down as a heart attack, but I knew better. Gloria didn't just lose her heart, she lost her will to live. Losing Rachel broke something inside her that never healed. That left 3 of us, me, Ivy, and Connor, Rachel's husband, my son-in-law. Connor has been raising Ivy on his own, and I've done what I could to help. For 7 years straight, every January, I sent him $40,000. No contracts, no conditions, just family support. Because that's what Rachel would have wanted. Because that's what a father does. That afternoon in September felt ordinary. Ivy sat next to me on our usual bench beneath the old oak tree, swinging her light-up sneakers and proudly telling me about her spelling test. She'd earned an A. I told her how proud I was. She smiled exactly like Rachel used to, and for a brief moment, the world felt steady again. Then her smile faded. "Grandpa," she whispered. She glanced toward the playground, then leaned in close, her voice barely audible. "Please stop sending the money." I stared at her. "What money?" "To Daddy." Her fingers tightened around my sleeve. There was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. "Please stop. There's something you need to see." My chest tightened. "Ivy, what are you talking about?" "Just watch him," she said quickly. "Watch Daddy. You'll understand." She jumped off the bench, sudden and anxious. "We have to go. He'll be angry if we're late. Wait, if something's wrong." "Please, Grandpa," she said one last time. "Just watch him." And that was all she would say. The drive back to Connor's house was quiet. Ivy sat in the back seat, staring out the window, gripping her backpack, like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I wanted to ask more, but the tension in her face told me not to. Not yet. Connor's house sits on Maple Street, a simple 2-story place with white siding, black shutters, and a lawn that always looks like it needs one more week of attention. I'd helped with the down payment 4 years earlier. Another check written without hesitation. He was standing on the front steps when we arrived. "You're late," he said, flat and impatient. "Traffic," I replied, though it wasn't true. Ivy was already out of the car, head down, moving quickly toward the door. Connor barely acknowledged her. "Go inside and start your homework." She didn't look back, didn't say goodbye, just disappeared into the house. I stood on the sidewalk and watched through the window as Ivy sat at the dining table. Connor walked straight past her phone, pressed to his ear, not even glancing in her direction. Something tightened in my stomach. "Connor," I called before he shut the door. "Everything okay? Ivy seems off." He shrugged. "She's fine. Kids are like that. She's been quiet." "She's 7, he said dismissively. "They get moods." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "By the way, any chance you could send next year's payment a little early? Got some expenses coming up." Next year's payment. It was only September. I never sent it before January. "What kind of expenses?" I asked. "House stuff. You know how it goes." He avoided my eyes. "Forget it. January's fine." The door closed. I sat in my car afterward, engine still running, hands tight around the steering wheel, my thoughts spinning. "Watch him," Ivy had said. "There's something you need to see. $40,000 every year. $280,000 over 7 years. A staggering amount for a man who rarely said thank you, for a man who couldn't even meet his daughter's eyes." I drove home as the sun dipped low, coloring the Pennsylvania sky in shades of orange and violet. My house greeted me with silence, the same silence that's lived there since Gloria died. Some nights I still reach for her in my sleep, forgetting for a heartbeat that she's gone. That night, sleep never came. I replayed every interaction I'd had with Connor. The money requests, the lack of updates, no invitations, no family dinners, no calls, just to talk. He'd moved on quickly after Rachel's death, started seeing someone else within a year. I'd told myself people grieve in different ways, but what if I'd been wrong? What if I'd ignored something important? Rachel's urn sat on the mantel downstairs. It had been there for 7 years. I never scattered the ashes like Gloria had wanted. I couldn't. It felt like the last piece of my daughter. Or so I believed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Ivy's whisper echoing in my mind. What was I supposed to see? The night they told me Rachel was dead, I didn't believe them. It was March 15th, 2017. 2 officers stood on my front porch at 3 in the morning, their faces carefully neutral in that way cops learn to do when they're about to destroy your world. Behind them, the street was empty and cold. I remember thinking it was too quiet for news like that. "There's been an accident on Route 9, the older one said. "Your daughter's vehicle went off the road. Vehicle. Not car. Not Rachel's Honda. Vehicle. Like using a distant word could soften what came next. She's at the hospital." I asked, already reaching for my coat. Gloria was behind me, gripping my arm. The officer shook his head. "Sir, I'm sorry. There was a fire. Your son-in-law identified her from dental records." That's when Gloria's knees buckled. The details came in pieces over the following days. Rachel had been driving home late from a friend's house, Natalie Hughes, her best friend since college. The car had veered off Route 9 near mile marker 47, hit a tree, and caught fire. By the time emergency crews arrived, the vehicle was fully engulfed. They said she died on impact. They said she didn't suffer. I've never been sure if that was true or just something they tell families. The funeral was closed casket. Had to be. Connor stood beside me at the service, Ivy on his hip. She was barely 6 months old then, and I remember thinking how wrong it was that my daughter's baby would never remember her mother's face, never hear her laugh. Never know how Rachel used to sing off-key in the shower or how she cried during sappy commercials. They gave us an urn, simple brass about the size of a shoebox. It sat on our mantel for a week before Gloria could even look at it. "We should scatter her ashes at the lake," she said one morning, voice hollow. "Remember how much she loved it there. We'd spent every summer at Lake Rayburn when Rachel was growing up. She'd learned to swim there, caught her first fish, kissed her first boyfriend under the dock. Gloria was right, it was the perfect place. But then Gloria died. 6 months after we buried our daughter, my wife's heart gave out. Just stopped. The doctors called it cardiac arrest, but I knew better. You can die of a broken heart. I watched it happen. She got thinner, quieter, more distant every day, until one morning I woke up and she was gone. Found her in the kitchen, collapsed by the coffee maker, the same one Rachel had bought us for Christmas 3 years earlier. After that, I couldn't bring myself to scatter the ashes. Couldn't let go of that urn. It felt like letting go of Rachel all over again, and I'd already lost too much. So it stayed on the mantel. Still does. 7 years now. Callahan Family Market kept me going. The store's been in my family for 35 years. My father started it back in 1989, and I took over when he retired. It's nothing fancy. Just a neighborhood grocery on the corner of 5th and Chestnut, the kind of place where people know your name and pay with crumpled bills from their jacket pockets. Mrs. Patterson buys her tea there every Tuesday. Old Joe Fletcher gets his lottery tickets every Friday. They all knew Rachel. They all came to the funeral. After Gloria died, the store became my anchor. I'd open at 6 every morning, stock shelves ring up customers close at 8. The routine kept me sane, kept me from thinking too much about the empty house waiting for me at the end of each day. And I kept my promise to Rachel. Before she died, she'd made me swear that if anything ever happened to her, I'd take care of Ivy. Make sure she had everything she needed. So I did. $40,000 a year sent to Connor every January like clockwork. It wasn't about the money. It was about keeping my daughter's memory alive, about making sure Ivy had opportunities, stability, a future. Connor never said much about it. A quick thanks in a text message, maybe. No updates on how the money was being used. No invitations to see Ivy more than our every other Saturday ice cream trips. I told myself he was just private, that grief made people withdraw. But Ivy's words at the park kept circling back. Please stop sending money. There's something you need to see. I stood in front of Rachel's urn that night, after driving home from Connor's house. Just stood there in my living room, staring at it in the dim light from the street lamp outside. 7 years I'd kept this thing. 7 years I'd honored it like it was sacred. What if something was wrong? What if Ivy knew something I didn't? I thought about the accident again. The details that never quite added up. How Rachel had been driving on Route 9, a road she knew by heart, and somehow lost control on a clear night. How the fire had been so intense there was nothing left to identify. How Connor had been the one to confirm it was her. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? Connor was her husband. He loved her. And I was drowning in my own grief, trying to keep Gloria alive, trying to keep myself from falling apart. But now, standing there in the quiet house with Ivy's frightened voice echoing in my head, I started to wonder. What had I missed? What was I still missing? For 7 years, I'd kept my promise. I'd sent the money. I'd trusted Connor. I'd believed the story they told me about the accident and the fire and the urn full of ashes. But now Ivy's words made me wonder, what was I really paying for? I saw the woman who would change everything on a Tuesday morning. The days after Ivy's warning at the park had been restless. I went through the motions, opening the store at 6 stocking shelves, helping customers, but my thoughts kept circling back to her words. Watch him. There's something you need to see. I tried. I drove past Connor's house twice, parked down the street like a nervous fool, and watched. Nothing seemed out of place. Just a man leaving for work, coming home, living his life. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe Ivy had been confused the way children sometimes are. That's what I told myself anyway. Tuesday mornings at Callahan Family Market are predictable. Mrs. Patterson comes in around 7 for her tea. Old Joe Fletcher arrives at 8 for lottery tickets and gum. By 9, there's a brief rush of people grabbing coffee before work. I know their routines. They know mine. It's comfortable. The woman walked in at 9:15. I noticed her immediately, because she wasn't a regular. Strangers happen, but something about her made me look twice. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, jeans, and an expensive-looking leather jacket. She moved with confidence, like she knew exactly where she was going. She went straight to the coffee aisle. I stood behind the register, sorting receipts, my hands stiff with arthritis. My knuckles ached, and I'd already dropped a roll of quarters that morning. Age had a way of slowing everything down. The woman placed a bag of ground coffee and a small jar of cinnamon on the counter. "That all for you?" I asked. "Yes." Her voice was clipped. Not rude, just distant. She handed me a 20 without looking up. "8.47's your change." She took it and turned to leave. That should have been the end of it. But as she passed me, something tugged at my memory. The way she moved, the shape of her face. Something familiar I couldn't place. "Ma'am," I called. She stopped and glanced back. "Yes. Have we met before?" Her expression didn't change. "I don't think so. You just remind me of someone. I hear that a lot." She pushed through the door and left. I stood there staring after her, trying to remember who she reminded me of. The harder I tried, the further it slipped away. 20 minutes later, I stepped outside to bring in the sandwich board sign. That's when I saw her again. She stood across the street beside a silver sedan, and she wasn't alone. Connor was with her. They were talking. Connor leaned against the car, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. She said something, and he laughed. Then she touched his arm briefly and got into the driver's seat. Connor walked around and climbed into the passenger side. I stood frozen sandwich board forgotten in my hands, watching the car pull away down 5th Street. Questions raced through my mind. Who was she? Why was Connor meeting her here? Why hadn't he mentioned her? I thought about how she avoided my eyes, how quickly she left. Coffee and cinnamon. Just those 2 items. Nothing else. Coffee and cinnamon? The combination unsettled me, though I couldn't explain why. I brought the sign inside, locked the door, and stood alone in the quiet store. The lights hummed. Cars passed outside. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt right. Ivy's voice echoed again. "Watch him." I had watched, and now I had seen something. But I didn't understand it yet. Connor had never mentioned a woman. After Rachel died, he'd said he dated a little nothing serious. He never introduced anyone to Ivy or me. So who was this woman? And why now? I pulled out my phone and stared at it. Roger Stevens had been my friend for 40 years. We met when his kids went to school with Rachel. He'd been a detective for 30 years before retiring. He knew how to read situations, how to find answers when things didn't add up. I hadn't wanted to bother him. Hadn't wanted to admit I might be chasing shadows because of something a child said. But now there was a woman. A woman I couldn't place. A woman meeting Connor outside my store. A woman who bought coffee and cinnamon and left like she didn't want to be remembered. I opened Roger's contact and typed a message. "Need to talk. Can you come by the store?" His reply came quickly. "Be there in 20. I set the phone down and looked around the store. The shelves I'd stocked for decades. The register that had served generations. The coffee aisle where the woman had stood minutes earlier. Everything looked the same. But deep in my gut, where instinct lives, I knew something was very wrong. Who was she? And why was she with Connor? When you need to find the truth, you call someone who knows how to look for lies. Roger Stevens had been my friend for 40 years, and in that time I'd learned that he had a particular way of listening. Not the polite nodding most people do while waiting for their turn to talk, but real listening, the kind where he'd tilt his head slightly, eyes focused, picking apart every word like he was solving a puzzle. He walked into Callahan Family Market 23 minutes after I'd sent the text. Gray hair, cut military short jeans, and a flannel shirt, reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck. 67 years old, and still moved like a man who'd spent 3 decades chasing criminals through back alleys. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks, Roger." He glanced around the empty store. "You closed, flipped the sign, figured we needed privacy? Must be serious." He pulled up a stool behind the counter and settled in. "What's going on?" I didn't know where to start. So I started with Ivy. Told him about the ice cream at the park. The whisper, the fear in her eyes when she'd said, "Watch him." Roger didn't interrupt, just pulled a small notebook from his pocket. He always carried one even in retirement and jotted down notes. Then I told him about this morning. The woman with the dark hair and leather jacket, coffee and cinnamon, the way she'd avoided my eyes, how I'd seen her 20 minutes later getting into a car with Connor. "You get a plate number?" Roger asked. No, I was too surprised. Description of the vehicle. A silver sedan, maybe a Honda or Toyota. I wasn't paying attention to the car. He made another note. What about the woman, height, weight, distinguishing features? I thought back trying to remember details. 5'6", maybe 5'7". Thin, dark hair in a ponytail. Mid-30s. Expensive-looking leather jacket, brown with zippers. You said she reminded you of someone. Yeah, but I can't place it. Just a feeling. Roger tapped his pen against the notebook. And Connor's never mentioned a woman. Never. But you've been giving him $40,000 a year for 7 years. For Ivy, I said quickly. The money's for Ivy. Right. Roger's tone was neutral, but I knew what he was thinking. Richard, when's the last time Connor gave you an update on how that money's being used? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. Not a real answer anyway. Connor had never sent receipts, never explained expenses, just accepted the check every January with a quick thanks and moved on. He's raising a daughter alone. I said, defensive now. I'm sure it's going to good use. I'm sure. Roger set his pen down and looked at me. But Ivy told you to stop sending money and to watch Connor. That's not normal, Richard. 7-year-olds don't say things like that unless something's wrong. I know. So what do you want me to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I'd called Roger because some part of me knew I needed help, but saying it out loud felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I need to know what's going on, I said finally. I need to know if Ivy's safe. If Connor's... I don't know. Doing something he shouldn't be. Roger leaned back on the stool, arms crossed. You want surveillance. Is that legal? On a public street. Watching someone's comings and goings from outside their property. He shrugged. Not illegal. Not particularly ethical if you're doing it to a family member, but not illegal. The word family hit harder than it should have. Connor wasn't blood, but he was Rachel's husband. Ivy's father. For 7 years, I'd sent him money because that's what family did. Now I was talking about spying on him like he was a suspect. I don't want to betray his trust, I said quietly. Then don't. Roger's voice was firm. Go home. Forget about the woman. Forget about Ivy's warning. Tell yourself everything's fine and keep writing those checks. I looked up sharply. You think I should ignore this? No. He met my eyes. I think you need to decide what matters more, Connor's trust or Ivy's safety. The words hung in the air between us. She's 7 years old, Roger continued. She came to you scared enough to whisper a warning in a park. She told you to stop sending money and to watch her father. Kids that age don't make things up, Richard. They don't have the imagination for it. If Ivy's worried, there's a reason. I thought about Ivy's face at the park. The way she'd gripped my sleeve. The fear in her eyes. What do we do? I asked. Roger picked up his pen again. We start simple. I've still got some equipment from my detective days, cameras, recording devices, all legal for private investigation purposes. We set up outside Connor's house. Watch who comes and goes. See if the mystery woman shows up again. Track his routine. Look for patterns. For how long? As long as it takes. He flipped to a fresh page in his notebook. Could be a few days. Could be a couple weeks. Depends on what we find. And if we find nothing, then you'll know Ivy was confused, and you can sleep better at night. Roger looked at me over his reading glasses. But I've been doing this a long time, Richard, and my gut says we're going to find something. Mine did too. That was the problem. When do we start? I asked. Tomorrow morning. I'll bring the equipment. We'll park down the street from Connor's place, see what happens. He stood tucking the notebook back into his pocket. Get some rest tonight. Once we start this, you need to be ready for whatever we find. I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't rest. Hadn't really rested since Ivy's whisper at the park. Roger headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. Richard, you're doing the right thing. Protecting a kid always is. Even if it means going behind Connor's back. Especially then. He pushed the door open and the little bell above it chimed. See you tomorrow, 6 a.m. The door closed behind him, and I was alone in the store again. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the coffee aisle where the woman had stood that morning, at the register where she'd paid in cash, at the front window where I'd watched her drive away with Connor. Tomorrow we'd start watching, start looking for answers, and I'd cross a line I'd never imagined crossing. As I drove home, I felt like I was crossing a line, but I had to know. For Ivy, money tells a story. I just had to read it. Before we started watching Connor, I needed to look at my own records. That evening, I spread 7 years of bank statements across my kitchen table. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I'd made coffee strong black, the way Gloria used to make it when we'd sit up late doing taxes or planning Rachel's college fund. The mug sat untouched beside me as I worked steam rising into the dim light above the table. January 2018, $40,000 wired to Connorell Wallace. The memo line read, Family Support. January 2019, same amount, same memo. I went through every year. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. $40,000 every single time, like clockwork. $280,000 total. I'd known the amount, obviously. I wrote the checks, authorized the transfers, but seeing it laid out like this 7 years in a row, 7 identical transactions, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. That was a fortune. A small fortune maybe, but more money than most people saw in a lifetime. And what did I have to show for it? I pulled out a shoebox I kept in the hall closet, the one with receipts and correspondence, anything related to Connor and Ivy. I sorted through 7 years of paperwork, looking for proof that the money had been used properly, proof that Connor was grateful, proof of anything, really. What I found was nothing. No thank you notes. No updates on Ivy's education or activities. No pictures of school events or birthday parties. Not a single piece of paper showing how the money had been spent or why it was needed. The only communications I had were text messages, and they were brief, almost cold. In January 2019, he'd written, "Got the transfer. Thanks." The next year, just received, appreciated. By 2021, it was down to transfer came through. Not even a full sentence most years. Just acknowledgement that he'd taken the money and moved on. I pulled up my phone and scrolled back through our text history. Hundreds of messages over 7 years, and almost all of them were initiated by me. I'd ask how Ivy was doing in school. Could I take her to the park this weekend? Did she need winter clothes? I could pick some up. Connor's responses were always short. She's fine. Sure. We're good. Never details. Never stories about what Ivy was learning or who her friends were. Never invitations to come over for dinner or join them for anything. Just the bare minimum required to keep me from asking more questions. And then there were the early requests. I flipped through my calendar checking dates. Every year, like clockwork, Connor would text me in November or December, asking if I could send the payment early. In November 2019, he'd written about expenses coming up before Christmas. December 2020, house repairs. November 2021, Ivy's school stuff. I'd always said yes, always sent it early, because family helped family, and I'd promised Rachel I'd take care of her daughter. But now looking at the pattern, something felt wrong. What kind of expenses came up every single year at the exact same time? And why did a man receiving $40,000 annually need it early? What was he spending it on that couldn't wait a few weeks? I opened my laptop and pulled up Connor's social media, something I rarely did. His Facebook was sparse. A few photos of Ivy from years ago, some posts about sports teams, nothing personal. His privacy settings were tight, so I could barely see anything. But one thing I could see was that his relationship status had changed 2 years ago from widowed to in a relationship. Then 6 months later, it went back to blank. He'd never mentioned dating anyone, never introduced anyone to Ivy or me. Who had it been? And what happened? I thought about the woman from this morning, the coffee and cinnamon, the way she'd touched Connor's arm before getting in the car. Was she the one? Or someone new? I pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Not because I knew what I was looking for, but because Roger had taught me once that patterns emerged when you wrote things down. I wrote down everything I could think of. Connor asking for money early every November or December. Never providing updates or receipts. Minimal communication. No family involvement. The relationship status change from 2 years ago. The mystery woman today. Then I wrote down my questions. Where was the $280,000 going? Who was the woman? Why did Ivy want me to stop sending money? What was Ivy afraid of? I set the pen down and looked at the pile of bank statements. 7 years of faith, 7 years of trust, 7 years of believing Connor was doing right by my granddaughter because I couldn't imagine a father doing anything else. But what if I'd been wrong? I got up and walked to the living room, where Rachel's urn still sat on the mantel. Beside it was a framed photo of Rachel, Gloria, and me at Lake Rayburn the summer before the accident. Rachel was laughing, head thrown back, Gloria's arm around her shoulders. Both of them looked so alive. "I'm trying, Rachel," I said to the photo. "I'm trying to do right by Ivy. I just don't know if I've been doing it the right way." The house was silent. I picked up another photo from the bookshelf, this one of Ivy from last year. She was sitting on the front steps of Connor's house, arms wrapped around her knees, not quite smiling. I'd taken it during one of my visits. At the time, I'd thought she looked thoughtful. Now I wondered if she'd looked sad. How long had she been trying to tell me something was wrong? I gathered all the bank statements and organized them by year, added the screenshots of our text messages, the information about his social media, the notes I'd just written, everything Roger might need to understand what we were dealing with. I put it all in a folder and set it by the front door so I wouldn't forget it in the morning. $280,000. That number kept echoing in my head. Not because it was money I couldn't afford to give. The store did well enough, and Gloria and I had been careful savers, but because it represented 7 years of promises, 7 years of trying to honor Rachel's memory by taking care of her family. What if her family didn't need taking care of? What if they'd been taking advantage? I poured the cold coffee down the sink, rinsed the mug, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the dark street. Tomorrow at 6 in the morning, Roger and I would park outside Connor's house and start watching. Start looking for answers to questions I should have asked years ago. I should have felt guilty. Should have felt like I was betraying Connor's trust by spying on him. But all I felt was determined. Ivy had asked me to watch, had trusted me enough to whisper a warning. And I'd failed her for 7 years by not asking the hard questions, by accepting Connor's silence as normal. I wouldn't fail her anymore. Tomorrow Roger and I would start watching. Whatever we found, I was ready. Some truths are buried in plain sight. The urn sat on my mantel for 7 years. I never opened it. After organizing all the bank statements and preparing the folder for Roger, I should have gone to bed. It was past 11, and we were meeting at 6 in the morning. But I stood in the living room, staring at that brass urn the way I'd stared at it 1,000 times before. And something felt different. The woman at the store had bought coffee and cinnamon. 2 items, nothing else. I'd been trying all evening to figure out why that bothered me. And now, standing here in the dim light with nothing but silence and the weight of 7 years pressing down, I finally understood. Coffee and cinnamon. My eyes moved from the urn to the framed photo beside it. Rachel, Gloria, and me at Lake Rayburn. All of us smiling. All of us believing we had more time. "I'm sorry," I whispered to Gloria's image. "I should have looked sooner. I'd avoided the urn for 7 years. Told myself it was because I couldn't let go, because opening it meant accepting that Rachel was really gone. But maybe the truth was simpler. Maybe some part of me had known even then that something was wrong. I lifted the urn from the mantel. It was heavier than I remembered, about the size of a shoebox, cold brass against my palms. The lid was sealed with a simple threaded cap, the kind you could unscrew with your hands. For a long moment, I just held it. Thought about Gloria standing in this exact spot 7 years ago, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Thought about the funeral, the closed casket, Connor's face carefully neutral as he accepted condolences. Thought about Ivy, 6 months old and oblivious, sleeping through her mother's memorial service. I carried the urn to the kitchen table and set it down under the overhead light. My hands shook as I gripped the lid. "Forgive me, Rachel," I said and twisted. The lid came off easily. Too easily, like it had been opened before. Inside was a clear plastic bag tied at the top with a twist tie. Through the plastic, I could see dark powder, almost black in the harsh kitchen light. It looked like ash, looked exactly like what you'd expect cremated remains to look like. I untied the bag and peered inside. The powder was coarse, not fine, grainy. I reached in and let some run through my fingers. It felt wrong, too rough, too textured. Then I smelled it. Coffee, not the faint burnt smell of cremated remains, not the sterile nothing of ash, but coffee. Rich, dark, unmistakable. My stomach turned. I brought the bag closer, inhaling deeper. Yes, definitely coffee, and something else underneath it, something sweet and spicy, cinnamon. The kitchen tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. No, this couldn't be right. This was Rachel. This was my daughter. They'd told me it was her. Connor had identified her. The funeral home had handled everything. I dumped the contents of the bag onto the table. Brown powder spilled out in a heap. Coffee grounds, darker in some spots, lighter in others. I sifted through it with my fingers, searching for something, anything that looked like bone. Like the fragments they tell you remain after cremation. Nothing, just coffee. And mixed throughout flecks of reddish-brown that I recognized immediately from 35 years of running a grocery store. Cinnamon, ground cinnamon. I touched one of the flecks to my tongue. Sweet, spicy. Definitely cinnamon. The powder wasn't ash. It was coffee grounds and baking spices, the kind you'd buy at any store. The kind a woman with dark hair and a leather jacket had bought from my store just this morning. For 7 years, I'd kept this urn on my mantel. For 7 years, I'd treated it like it was sacred. Gloria had stood here crying, had kissed the cold brass, and whispered goodbye to our daughter. She died 6 months later with a broken heart, believing Rachel's remains were resting above our fireplace. And it was coffee. Kitchen scraps, a joke. The rage hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. I swept my arm across the table, sending the urn clattering to the floor. It rang like a bell as it bounced hollow and mocking. "Am you?" I shouted at no one, at Connor, at whoever had done this. "Damn you!" I braced my hands on the table shoulders, heaving, staring down at the pile of coffee and cinnamon scattered across the wood. 7 years. 7 years of grief. 7 years of Gloria destroying herself with sorrow. 7 years of me honoring an empty promise, paying money to a man who'd helped fake my daughter's death. Because that's what this was. Had to be. If the urn was fake, then the funeral was fake. If the funeral was fake, then maybe the body was fake. And if the body was fake, my phone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided to pick it up. I pulled up Roger's contact and called. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. "Richard, It's almost midnight. The urn. My voice came out hoarse, shaking. Roger, the urn is fake. Silence on the other end. Then more alert. What do you mean, fake? I opened it. It's not Rachel. It's coffee and cinnamon, just like the woman at the store bought this morning. I heard rustling like he was sitting up. You're sure? I'm looking at it right now, spread all over my kitchen table. I laughed, but it came out broken. My wife died thinking our daughter's ashes were on the mantel, and it was coffee the whole time. Richard? Roger's voice was calm, steady, the detective voice. Listen to me. Don't touch anything else. Don't clean it up. I'm coming over right now. They lied to us. The words felt thick in my throat. The funeral. The body. Connor identified someone who wasn't Rachel. They burned someone else and gave us kitchen scraps in a brass box. I'm 10 minutes away. Stay there. Don't call Connor. Don't call anyone. I'm coming. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by coffee grounds and cinnamon, staring at the overturned urn on the floor. The house was silent, except for my ragged breathing. 7 years ago, they'd told me my daughter was dead. They'd shown me a closed casket. They'd handed me this urn and told me it contained her remains. And I'd believed them. Gloria had believed them. We'd mourned. We'd broken. We died a little bit ourselves. And it was all a lie. I looked at the scattered coffee grounds, at the cinnamon mixed throughout, at the empty brass urn lying on its side. My daughter's urn was a lie. What else had they lied about? Surveillance is mostly waiting. But when something happens, everything changes. Roger brought the cameras the next morning. He'd stayed until nearly 1 a.m. the night before, documenting the coffee grounds and cinnamon from the urn, photographing everything, and scribbling notes into his small notebook. Before leaving, he told me to get some sleep and that we'd start surveillance at dawn. I tried. I lay awake thinking about brass urns, kitchen scraps, and 7 years of trust that might have been misplaced. When Roger knocked at 5:30, I was already dressed. You look terrible, he said, hauling 2 black duffel bags inside. Didn't sleep, figured. He set the bags on my kitchen table and unzipped one. Inside were cameras, lenses, recorders, and equipment I didn't recognize. We'll park down the street from Connor's house. Public road. Legal surveillance. 2 old guys sitting in a car. What are we watching for? Patterns. Who comes and goes? When Connor leaves? When he gets home? And whether your mystery woman shows up again. He lifted a camera with a long lens, and maybe we learn where $280,000 went. We drove to Connor's neighborhood in Roger's gray sedan, a car so ordinary it blended into any street. He parked 3 houses down, far enough not to draw attention, close enough to see the driveway and front door clearly. Then we waited. Connor left at 7:45. He backed out, turned toward the main road, and disappeared. Roger wrote the time down. Usual schedule, Roger asked. It used to be. Construction management, I think. I haven't asked in years. Roger nodded but said nothing. We stayed until noon, then rotated. Roger went home. I stayed watching the house, glancing at Ivy's upstairs window, hoping she was all right. Nothing happened that afternoon. Connor came home at 6, went inside, and didn't come back out. A normal evening. The second day followed the same rhythm. Connor left at 7:45. Came home at 6. Roger and I took shifts documenting everything. Then late afternoon on day 2, the woman arrived. The same silver sedan from the store. She pulled into Connor's driveway. At 2:30, walked to the front door and unlocked it. She has a key, I said, calling Roger. He arrived 20 minutes later with the telephoto lens. We watched as Connor and the woman sat on the couch. We couldn't hear them, but we could see her lean close, see Connor laugh, see her touch his arm with easy familiarity. They looked comfortable, familiar. Who is she? I asked. When did Connor last mention dating Roger? Snapped photos. He hasn't. Not once. She stayed 2 hours. When she left, Connor walked her to her car. They stood in the driveway talking. Her hand rested on his chest. His hand settled at her waist. Then she drove off. Roger wrote down her license plate. The third day she came back. Same time, same routine. Stayed an hour. Left. That weekend when I took Ivy for ice cream, Connor didn't mention her, didn't mention dating. Acted like nothing had changed, but something had. By day 4, we knew Connor's routine. Up at 7, gone by 7:45, home by 6. The woman visited every other afternoon. Then, on the 4th morning, everything shifted. Connor left at 10 a.m.? That's new, I said. Roger started the engine. Let's see where he goes. We followed him, keeping distance. Past Callahan Family Market. Past familiar streets. Into the industrial district on the east side of town. Warehouses, loading docks, semi-trucks. Connor turned onto East Industrial Avenue and pulled into a worn parking lot. A large brick warehouse. Building 447, narrow windows, few cars. He parked near a side entrance and went inside. Roger stopped across the street behind a delivery truck. What is this place? I asked. Roger searched on his phone. Warehouse, owned by a holding company, used for storage or light manufacturing. Why would Connor be here? That's what we need to learn. We waited. 45 minutes passed before Connor came out, got in his car, and drove away. We stayed. What do you think he's doing in there? I asked. Roger tapped his notebook. Could be storage, a side operation, meetings. With her, maybe. He wrote down the address. We come back. Watch this place like his house. I stared at the building. Tall, sealed windows. Quiet. Empty looking. But Connor had just spent 45 minutes inside. There's something in there, I said. Roger nodded. Yeah, and we're going to find out what it is. I spent the entire night pacing through my house, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except the voice we'd heard inside the warehouse. The crying, the pleading, the words that replayed over and over in my head. Like a broken record, I've been here for 7 years. When Roger knocked on my door at 7 that morning, I had already been awake for hours. You look worse than yesterday, he said as he carried his laptop bag inside. Didn't sleep. Figured. He placed the laptop on my kitchen table and opened it. Richard, I need you to sit down for this. What is it? Just sit, please. I sat. Roger pulled up a video file. Remember when I told you I still have contacts on the force? One of them accessed security footage around the warehouse. All public cameras, traffic monitoring, completely legal. And this. He pressed play. The footage was black and white and grainy, the kind used on nightly news broadcasts. A wide shot of East Industrial Avenue appeared, the timestamp showing early afternoon 3 days earlier. Cars passed, a delivery truck. Nothing unusual. Then a woman entered the frame from the left, walking along the sidewalk. That's the warehouse, Roger said, pointing to a building in the background. That's the side entrance Connor uses. The woman walked closer to the camera. Her face was partially turned away, but as she moved, the angle shifted. Roger paused the video. Look at her face, Richard. I leaned closer. The image wasn't sharp, but it didn't need to be. Dark hair pulled back. Thin frame. Something familiar in her posture and the way her head tilted slightly as she walked. My heart stopped. No, I whispered. Look closer. Roger zoomed in. The pixels blurred, but the shape remained. The nose. The cheekbones. That subtle tilt of the head I had seen thousands of times when she was a teenager, when she was in college, when she stood beside me on her wedding day. That's not possible, I said, though. My voice was shaking. Roger opened another window. I ran the image through facial recognition software. Compared it to Rachel's driver's license photo from 7 years ago. 2 images appeared side by side. On the left, Rachel's license photo from 2017. Younger, smiling. On the right, a still frame from the warehouse footage. Older, no smile, darker hair, but the same face. 97% match, Roger said softly. Richard. That's Rachel. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. No, she's dead. We buried her. We had a funeral. You had a closed casket funeral, Roger said gently. You cremated someone, but you never saw a body. And the urn was filled with coffee grounds. I stared at the screen, at my daughter's face. Changed, older, but unmistakably alive. She's alive, I whispered. Yes. Rachel's alive. Yes. The words didn't make sense. For 7 years I had mourned her. I had stood at her grave, at that empty grave with its false headstone, and talked to her like she could hear me. For 7 years her urn sat on my mantel, and I believed it held her ashes. And she was alive. The grief came first. Not relief. Not joy. Grief. Crushing and suffocating. Grief for 7 years stolen from us. 7 years Gloria and I could have spent with our daughter. 7 years Ivy could have known her mother. Then the rage followed. Gloria died believing Rachel was dead. I said, my voice breaking. She died of a broken heart. And our daughter was alive the entire time. Roger stayed silent. I paid Connor $280,000, I continued. $280,000 to care for Ivy because her mother was supposedly dead. I know. Ivy thinks she's an orphan, I said, standing abruptly. She doesn't even know her own mother is alive. How could Rachel let us believe this? How could she let Gloria die thinking? Richard, Roger said firmly. We don't know the full story. What story could possibly justify this? I don't know, he said. But think about what we heard yesterday. That voice in the warehouse. She was crying, begging. She said she'd been there for 7 years. Does that sound like someone who chose to disappear? I stopped. The words echoed again in my mind. I've been here for 7 years. She's not free, Roger continued. She's being held there, and Connor is the one keeping her. The rage shifted, focused. Connor had lied to me for 7 years. Identified a body that wasn't my daughter. Took my money. Let Gloria die. Kept Ivy from her mother. Connor had imprisoned my child. We need to go there now, I said, moving toward the door. Roger blocked me. Not yet. She's alive. She's being held prisoner. And if we rush in without knowing everything, we could make it worse, he said. We don't know who else is involved. We don't know what Connor has over her. We don't know how dangerous this is. I don't care, Richard, Roger said, gripping my shoulders. Your daughter has survived 7 years in that warehouse. If we act recklessly, she could get hurt. The words stopped me cold. We need the full truth, Roger said. Then we get her out safely. How? We talked to her, he said. Away from Connor. The footage shows she leaves the warehouse briefly each afternoon. If she has a routine, we approach her then and say what? We tell her you're here, Roger said quietly. That you know she's alive. That you want to help. I sank back into the chair, head in my hands. My daughter was alive, and for 7 years I had believed she was dead. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to see her. Roger had wanted to wait. Plan it out. Catch her when she came outside during the day, approach her somewhere safe. But how was I supposed to go home and sleep, knowing my daughter who I'd mourned for 7 years, was alive, locked in some warehouse while I sat in my empty house staring at fake ashes? I couldn't do it. So at 9 o'clock that night I got in my car. Didn't even tell Roger I was going, just drove. He was already there when I pulled up, standing by his car across from building 447, arms crossed, waiting. He'd known. Of course he'd known. Couldn't sleep either, I said. They figured you'd do something stupid. He wasn't smiling. If we're doing this, we do it my way. We go in, we stay calm, we listen. Got it, yeah. I mean it, Richard. No matter what she says, no matter how angry you get. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. The warehouse looked wrong at night, like something out of a nightmare. One light in an upper window. Everything else dark. We crossed the street. The side door Connor always used, Roger tried the handle. Unlocked. He looked at me. Private investigation, reasonable cause. Someone's in danger. I know. No, just making sure we're clear. He pushed the door open. Inside was bigger than I expected. Colder. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones. High ceilings, shadows everywhere, shelves stacked with God knows what. But in the back corner, past all the industrial debris, someone had tried to make a home. A twin bed. Blankets that had seen better days. A card table with a hot plate, instant coffee, plastic spoons. Clothes on wire hangers strung between two posts. One folding chair. One battery lamp throwing weak yellow light across concrete floors. And photos. Taped to the wall above the bed. Ivy, all of them. Every school picture I'd sent Connor over the years. Every birthday photo. That one from the park last summer where she'd lost her front tooth. They were here. On this wall, in this warehouse. He'd been showing them to Rachel. She was sitting on the bed, staring at those photos like they were the only thing keeping her alive. When the door creaked, she looked up. 7 years. 7 years since I'd seen that face. She looked God. She looked so different. Thinner. Way too thin. Hair darker, longer, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks. Maybe months. And something else. Something in the way she held herself. Like she was always ready to run. Dad. Just that one word. Barely a whisper. And I lost it. How could you? It came out louder than I meant. Harsher. She flinched back against the wall. How could you do this to us? I can explain. Explain. I took a step toward her. She pressed harder against the wall. Your mother died, Rachel. Your mother. She died thinking you were gone. Dad, please. She cried every single day. Every single day for 6 months. Do you understand that 6 months of watching her waste away and I couldn't? My voice cracked. I couldn't help her because our daughter was dead. Except you weren't dead. You were here. You were here the whole time. The words were coming out wrong, too angry, too loud, but I couldn't stop them. Gloria died believing you burned to death in that car. She died of a broken heart. And you just let her. You let her die thinking, I didn't want that. Rachel was crying now, full-on crying, sliding down the wall until she hit the floor. I never wanted any of this. Then why? I was almost shouting. Why did you do it? Why did you let us have a funeral for a stranger? Why did you let me pay Connor $280,000 to raise your daughter while you hid in a warehouse? She was sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. Just sitting there on the concrete floor, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking. Roger stepped between us. Physically stepped between us. Richard, stop. She needs to explain, and she will, but you need to calm down. Calm down. My daughter's been lying to me for 7 years. Richard. Roger's voice cut through everything. Look at her. I stopped, looked, really looked this time. She wasn't just thin, she was gaunt. Cheekbones too sharp, wrists too small. Her clothes, a faded t-shirt, and jeans that didn't fit hung off her like she'd been wearing them for years. Her hair was dull, lifeless, and those scars on her arms. Small white lines. Some old, some newer. This wasn't someone who'd run away to start a new life in paradise. This was someone barely surviving. Rachel, Roger said quietly. He crouched down, not getting too close. We're not here to hurt you. We're here because we want to help. Can you look at me? She raised her head, eyes red and swollen and terrified. "Yeah, we need to understand what happened." Roger continued. "Can you tell us that—" She looked at him, then at me, then at the photos of Ivy on the wall. "If I tell you," her voice was so small, "if I tell you, you'll hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. And weirdly, I meant it. I was furious, devastated, confused as hell. But looking at her sitting there on that floor in that warehouse surrounded by photos of the daughter she'd never met, I couldn't hate her. "I just need to know why." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. It's not a simple story. We have time." "Oh, do you—" She laughed, but it came out broken. "Do you really want to hear this?" "Yes." She stared at the concrete floor for a long time. So long I thought she'd changed her mind. Then she spoke. "Does Ivy know about me being alive?" "No. She thinks you're dead. Everyone does." Another sob, quick, choked off. "Maybe that's better." "Rachel, you don't understand, Dad." She looked up at me. Those eyes, Jesus, those eyes looked dead. "You don't understand what I did, what I am. So help me understand." Silence. Just the sound of her breathing. Ragged, uneven. Finally, 7 years ago, something happened. Something I can't take back. And the only way to survive was to disappear. To let everyone think I was dead. "What happened?" Roger asked. She closed her eyes. "If I tell you, you have to promise me something." "What?" "That you won't tell Ivy, ever. She can't know about this. About me. About any of it." "Rachel, promise me." Her voice cracked. "Please. She deserves better than me." I looked at Roger. He gave a small shake of his head. "Don't promise that. Just tell us what happened," I said. She pulled her knees tighter to her chest. "I need to start at the beginning, but when I'm done." She looked at me with those hollow, broken eyes. "When I'm done, you'll understand why I can never leave here. Why I can never see Ivy. Why this is what I deserve." My throat felt tight. "Rachel, the truth came in pieces. But I was about to learn it was only part of the truth." Rachel's voice shook as she began. "It was 7 years ago. March. Natalie came over to my apartment. We lived about 20 minutes apart back then. She'd borrowed money from me. A lot of money. $5,000. She paused, looked at her hands. I needed it back. Connor and I were trying to buy a house, and I'd told Natalie that. Told her I needed the money by the end of the month. But she kept making excuses. Said she'd pay me back next week, next month when her tax return came. It had been almost a year. Her voice got quieter. So that night I told her I needed it. Like really needed it. And she got defensive. Started saying I was being selfish, that I didn't understand how hard things were for her. "What happened?" Roger asked gently. Rachel closed her eyes. "We argued. It got loud. Connor wasn't home. He'd taken Ivy to his mom's for the weekend. It was just us. And Natalie, she said something about how I always thought I was better than her. Always had everything figured out. And she stopped, swallowed hard. I told her she was irresponsible. That maybe if she stopped spending money on stupid things, she could pay me back. And she got in my face. Like really in my face. Yelling. And I pushed her. The warehouse was completely silent. I just pushed her. Not hard. Just to get her away from me. But she stumbled backward and... Rachel's voice cracked. She hit the coffee table, the corner of it, right here. Tutti. She touched the side of her head just above her temple. There was this sound. This awful sound. And she fell. Just collapsed. Tears were streaming down her face now. She was hurt. Really hurt. There was so much. on the carpet, on the table, on my hands. And Natalie, she wasn't moving. She wasn't responding. I checked, but I couldn't feel anything, and I didn't know what to do. She was hyperventilating. Roger moved closer but didn't touch her. Breathe, Rachel, just breathe. She gulped air, nodded, kept going. I panicked. I called Connor. He came home right away. And when he walked in and saw Natalie on the floor, he just stared for a minute. Then he checked her, put his fingers on her neck, and he looked at me and said, "She's gone." My stomach turned. I couldn't stop crying. Couldn't think. Connor kept saying we had to stay calm, had to figure this out. He said it was self-defense, that I'd just been protecting myself. But he said, she looked at me. He said even if it was an accident, even if it was self-defense, I'd probably still go to prison. That Natalie's family would push for charges. That I'd lose everything. Lose you, lose Mom, lose Ivy. So he suggested faking your death, Roger said. Rachel nodded. He said it was the only way. That if I disappeared, if everyone thought I was gone, no one would connect me to what happened with Natalie. He said he'd take care of everything. The situation, the evidence, all of it. I just had to trust him. And you did. What choice did I have? Her voice rose, desperate. My best friend I was responsible for what happened. I was terrified. And Connor was so calm, so sure. He said he knew someone who could help, someone who worked at the morgue. I felt sick. Gary. I don't know his name. Connor never told me. But yeah, someone at the morgue. Connor said he could help us with the situation. Someone who had passed without family. Someone no one would miss. She shuddered. It sounds so horrible saying it out loud. What happened to Natalie? Roger asked. Connor said he took care of everything, that no one would ever find out. He wouldn't tell me where. Said it was safer if I didn't know. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself. That same night he brought me here, to the warehouse. Told me to stay put while he arranged everything. The accident, the funeral, all of it. The Route 9 accident. I said, yeah. He staged it to look like I'd crashed. The car caught fire. Made sure what they found couldn't be identified. Then he came back here and told me it was done. Everyone thought I was gone, and now I had to stay hidden until it was safe. Safe from what Roger asked, from the police, from Natalie's family. Rachel's voice was hollow. Connor said they'd figure it out eventually. That someone would notice Natalie was missing. That they'd start asking questions. He said if I stayed hidden, if I just waited it out, eventually people would forget. Move on. So for 7 years, she laughed bitterly. It was supposed to be temporary. A few months, maybe a year. But every time I asked when I could leave, Connor said it wasn't safe yet. That the police were still looking. That Natalie's family hired a private investigator. That people were asking questions about me. She looked at the photos of Ivy on the wall. He said it was better this way. That Ivy was safer not knowing me. That if I came back, if anyone found out what happened, Ivy would suffer for it. So I stayed. For her. To protect her. My chest felt tight. Rachel, did you know I was sending Connor money? What money? $40,000 a year. For 7 years. To take care of Ivy. Her face went pale. I didn't know that. Connor never told me. He never mentioned it. No, he brought me food, supplies, sometimes clothes. He said he was taking care of Ivy, that she was fine. That was it. Roger and I exchanged a look, which is what Roger said carefully. When Natalie fell, when you checked on her, are you absolutely certain she didn't make it? Rachel stared at him. She was so hurt. She wasn't moving. But did you check thoroughly? Did Connor check? He put his fingers on her neck. He said she was gone. But you didn't see him do it. You were crying, panicking. You might not have seen exactly what he did. What are you saying? Roger leaned forward. I'm saying Connor told you Natalie didn't make it, but you never actually confirmed it yourself. You were in shock. You trusted him. She was... Rachel stopped. I saw her fall. I saw how badly she was hurt. Now head injuries can look worse than they are, Roger said. Even minor ones can cause a lot of... He paused. A lot of visible damage. It doesn't necessarily mean the worst. No, Rachel shook her head. No, she's gone. I'm responsible, that's why I'm here. Roger looked at me, then back at Rachel. Rachel, have you seen Natalie since that night? What number? Of course not. See, have you seen anything that proves what Connor told you was true? Connor said a lot of things. Roger's voice was firm. But have you actually seen proof? Rachel's face crumpled. Why are you asking me this? Roger pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward Rachel. Because I ran Natalie Hughes's name through the system yesterday, and according to public records, she's very much alive. Rachel stared at the phone, at whatever Roger was showing her, and the color drained from her face. That's not possible. This photo was taken 6 weeks ago, at a coffee shop in town. That's Natalie Hughes, alive and well. Rachel looked at Roger, then at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. No, she finally whispered. She's gone. I saw her. I'm responsible for what happened. Roger's eyes met mine. No, Rachel, I don't think you are. The truth wasn't just different from what I thought. It was the opposite. Roger pulled out his phone and showed Rachel a photo. This, he said quietly, was taken 3 days ago. Rachel stared at the screen. Her face went white. Actually white, like all the blood had drained out of it in an instant. That's not possible. That's Natalie Hughes, Roger said. At Corner Brew, the coffee shop on Main Street, 3 days ago. Very much alive. Rachel's hands were shaking. No, she's... I saw her. She fell. She was hurt. Connor said... Connor lied. The words hung there. I looked at the photo. A woman, dark hair, mid-30s, sitting at a table with a coffee cup smiling at something off camera. She looked healthy, happy, alive. I don't understand, Rachel whispered. Roger sat down on the folding chair, phone still in hand. Rachel, I need you to think very carefully about that night. The fight with Natalie. When she fell. What exactly did you see? I pushed her. She stumbled, hit the table. Rachel's voice was mechanical, like she'd told this story so many times it had become a script. She was hurt. On the carpet, on the table. She wasn't moving. Did you check on her yourself? I tried. I couldn't feel a pulse. There was too much, and I was panicking, But then Connor came home, Roger interrupted gently. And he took over, right? Rachel nodded slowly. And he checked. And he told you she didn't make it. And you believed him. Why wouldn't I believe him? He's my husband. He was trying to help me. Roger leaned forward. Rachel, I don't think Natalie was ever hurt. I think the whole thing was staged. Silence. Complete silence. What? Rachel's voice was barely audible. The fight. The fall. The coup. Roger paused. The scene. I think Connor and Natalie set it up. Fake scenario. Designed to make you believe you'd done something terrible. That's insane. Height is it? Roger pulled up another photo. This is Connor and Natalie, 2 years ago, at a restaurant in Wilmington. He swiped. Another photo. This is them last year. Same restaurant. Swipe. 6 months ago. Hotel in Newark. He kept swiping, more photos, Connor and Natalie, together, close, intimate. They've been seeing each other for years, Rachel. Long before that night in your apartment. Rachel stared at the photos. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I think they planned this from the beginning, Roger continued. The fight was fake. Connor probably told Natalie exactly what to do, how to fall, how to make it look bad. They probably used theater makeup, fake scenario materials, made it look worse than it was. But you saw what they wanted you to see. And then Connor came in and confirmed it. Told you Natalie was gone, that you were responsible, that you had to hide. Roger's voice was firm but not harsh. He manipulated you, Rachel. He used your panic and your guilt to control you. And he's been controlling you for 7 years. The warehouse felt impossibly cold. Why? Rachel asked. Why would they do that? Roger looked at me, then back at Rachel. Money, I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow. My money. Rachel's eyes widened. For 7 years, I've been sending Connor $40,000 a year. $280,000 total, to take care of Ivy. I felt sick saying it out loud. He convinced me it was for Ivy, but it was for him and Natalie. I didn't know, Rachel whispered. I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't. Roger pulled up his phone again. I've been digging into Connor's finances. He's got an offshore account. Started 7 years ago right after your accident. Yeah, money's been flowing in regularly. $40,000 a year like clockwork. Plus other amounts, smaller transfers. Well, from where? I'm still working on that. But I found something else. He showed us a bank statement. 3 weeks ago, Connor transferred most of the account balance, just over $60,000, to a different account. In the Cayman Islands. My stomach dropped. He's planning to run, Roger said. Him and Natalie, take the money and disappear. Rachel looked like she might be sick. So none of it was real. The fight, the accident, the hiding, none of it. Oh, the hiding was real, Roger said quietly. But it wasn't to protect you from the police. It was to keep you locked up, out of the way. So Connor could collect your father's money and live his life with Natalie without you interfering. 7 years. 7 years my daughter had been trapped in this warehouse believing she was a criminal while her husband and her best friend lived free. Took my money, took everything. He used me, Rachel said. Her voice was shaking. He used me and Mom. Mom passed thinking I was gone. Because of them. Because of their lies. Yes, and Ivy. Ivy doesn't know me because she couldn't finish. I moved closer, crouched down beside her, put my hand on her shoulder. She flinched, then looked at me. Really looked at me. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have checked. You were manipulated, I said. My throat felt tight. This isn't your fault, Rachel. None of this is your fault. You were a victim. You still are. But Mom would want you to live. The words came out fiercer than I intended. She would want you to be free, and she would want us to make this right. Rachel's face crumpled. She started crying, not the panicked sobbing from before, but something deeper. Grief, relief, 7 years of pain pouring out. I pulled her into a hug. My daughter, alive, broken, but alive. Roger gave us a minute. Then he cleared his throat. Richard, Rachel, I know this is a lot, but we need to act fast. If Connor's planning to run, we don't have much time. I pulled back, looked at Roger. What do we do? We need evidence. Real evidence. The kind that'll hold up in court. Roger stood. Financial records help, but we need more. We need Connor and Natalie to confess. On record. How do we do that? Roger looked at both of us. We set a trap. We make them think they've won, that they're safe. And then we get them to admit everything. Rachel wiped her eyes. How? You... Roger said, looking at her. You're the key. Connor thinks you're completely under his control, thinks you believe everything he's told you. We use that. You want me to talk to him? I want you to wear a wire. Confront him. Get him talking. And once he starts, once he thinks you're still too scared to do anything about it, he'll tell you the truth. Rachel looked terrified. But then something changed in her face. A hardness I hadn't seen before. He kept me here for 7 years, she said quietly. He let me believe I'd hurt someone. He let Mom... She stopped. Swallowed. He let your mom pass thinking I was gone. He used Ivy. He used you. She looked at Roger. What do I need to do? Roger looked at both of us. If we're going to take them down, we need them to confess. And I have an idea. Every good trap needs bait. We had the perfect bait, the truth. We met at Roger's house the next morning to plan. I hadn't slept. Again. Spent the whole night thinking about Rachel in that warehouse, about Connor and Natalie living free while my daughter rotted in prison. About Gloria. About Ivy. About 7 years of lies. Roger's house was small but organized. Retired detective organized. Papers stacked neatly. Coffee brewing. A dining room table covered in folders and equipment I didn't recognize. Rachel sat across from me looking small and exhausted. She'd stayed at my house last night, first time in 7 years she'd slept in an actual bed. I'd heard her crying through the wall around 3 a.m. Didn't know what to say, so I just let her be. Roger set down 3 mugs of coffee and opened his laptop. Okay, here's what we need. He pulled up a document. Connor and Natalie have to confess. On record. Admissible in court. That means we need audio, clear audio, no ambiguity. How? I asked. Or wire. We put a recording device on Rachel. She goes back to the warehouse. When Connor shows up, and he will show up, he always does, she confronts him. Gets him talking. Once he thinks she's still under his control, he'll admit everything. Rachel's coffee mug shook in her hands. You want me to talk to him? After everything. I know it's hard. Hard. Her voice cracked. He kept me locked up for 7 years. He made me think She stopped. And you want me to sit there and act like everything's fine? No, Roger said firmly. I want you to act like you know. Like you're done being scared. Like you're giving him one chance to tell you the truth before you go to the police. Will that work? My Connor's arrogant. He thinks you're broken, thinks you'll never stand up to him. Roger leaned forward. When you confront him, when you show strength instead of fear, he'll panic. And when people panic, they talk. They justify, they explain, they confess. Rachel looked at me. Dad, I wanted to say no. Wanted to tell Roger we'd find another way. But I knew there wasn't another way. You've survived 7 years of his lies, I said quietly. You can do this. She was silent for a long moment, then nodded. Roger pulled out his phone. I've already talked to Detective Kevin Walsh. He's with the County Police Fraud Division. I worked with him for 15 years before I retired. He's solid, and he's ready to move on this. Move how? I asked. Walsh gets us the wire. Official equipment properly documented. Everything legal and admissible. He'll also position officers nearby unmarked vehicles, plain clothes. If anything goes wrong, they move in immediately. What counts as wrong? Roger's jaw tightened. If Connor threatens Rachel, if things get physical, if she uses the safe word, something she can say that sounds natural but signals she's in danger. Officers come in the second they hear it. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself. What should it be? Something you'd actually say. Something that won't sound weird in conversation. Roger thought for a moment. What about Ivy's name? If you mention Ivy, we know you need help. She nodded slowly. Okay. Ivy. Roger made a note. Walsh will have his team in position by 7 p.m. tomorrow. That's when Connor usually comes to the warehouse, right? Usually, Rachel said. Sometimes earlier if he's bringing supplies. We'll be ready either way. Roger looked at me. Richard, you and I will be in my car across the street. Camera with telephoto lens. Backup recording equipment. Walsh's team will have the primary audio feed from Rachel's wire, but we'll have secondary recording just in case. In case of what? Technical failure, interference, anything. Roger pulled out a small black device about the size of a quarter. This is the wire. Clips under clothing near the collarbone. Picks up everything within 15 feet. Battery lasts 6 hours. Rachel stared at it. That tiny thing. Technology's come a long way. Roger set it down carefully. Walsh will come by tomorrow afternoon to fit it properly. Show you how it works. Test the signal. What do I say to Connor? Rachel asked. When he gets there. How do I start? Roger pulled out his notebook. We'll script it. Not word for word that'll sound fake, but general talking points. Ways to guide the conversation. He started writing. You start calm. Tell him you know. Don't say how you know, just that you do. See how he reacts. He'll deny it, Rachel said. Probably. That's when you push. Tell him you know about Natalie, that she's alive. Watch his face. He'll either keep denying or he'll shift strategies. Try to explain, justify. Then what if he gets angry? And then you stay calm. The calmer you are, the more he'll panic. And panic makes people sloppy. Roger looked at her. Can you do that? Stay calm, even if he's angry. Rachel's hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. He stole 7 years from me. He used my daughter. He let your wife. She looked at me. He let Gloria pass away, believing her daughter was gone. I can stay calm, because I want him to pay for that. Something shifted in the room. Rachel wasn't the broken woman from the warehouse anymore. She was angry, and anger, I was learning, could be a kind of strength. We spent the next 2 hours going over scenarios. What if Connor brought Natalie? What if he tried to leave? What if he figured out she was wired? Roger had answers for everything. Backup plans. Exit strategies. Walsh's team positioning. By noon, we had a plan. Not a perfect plan, but a plan. Roger made sandwiches, ham and cheese, like we were just 3 people having lunch instead of 3 people plotting to take down a con artist and his accomplice. Rachel ate half of hers. Kept looking at that tiny wire on the table. You scared? I asked. Terrified. She set down her sandwich. But I'm more angry than scared. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. She looked at me. Dad, what if this doesn't work? What if he... It'll work. But if it doesn't, then Walsh's team moves in, and we figure out plan B. I reached across the table, put my hand over hers. But you won't be alone in there. Roger and I will be right outside. Walsh's team will be listening to every word. And the second you say Ivy's name, it's over. We get you out. She nodded. Didn't look convinced, but nodded. Roger's phone buzzed. He checked it. Walsh. Says he'll be here tomorrow at 3 p.m. to set up the wire and go over protocols. Tomorrow? Rachel whispered. Tomorrow. Roger confirmed. He looked at both of us. Tomorrow night, 7 years of lies end. One way or another. The wire was smaller than I expected. Detective Kevin Walsh held it up between his thumb and forefinger that afternoon. We were at the police station, not the main building, but a smaller office Walsh used for sensitive cases. Plain room, table, chairs. Recording equipment spread out like surgical tools. This, Walsh said, looking at Rachel, is your lifeline. And ours. He was younger than Roger, maybe mid-40s, sharp eyes. The kind of cop who'd seen everything and still cared anyway. Roger had vouched for him, said Walsh was one of the good ones. Rachel stared at the tiny device. That's it. Eclipse right here. Walsh gestured to his collarbone. Under your shirt. Picks up everything within 15 feet. Crystal clear audio. We'll be listening the whole time. And if something goes wrong, you say Ivy's name. Doesn't matter what context. The second we hear it, we move. Walsh's voice was firm. You won't even finish the sentence before my team is through that door. Rachel nodded. Her hands were shaking. Walsh spent 20 minutes showing her how the wire worked, how to position it, how to test it, how to move naturally so it wouldn't show or make noise. Professional, methodical, like he'd done this 100 times. Probably had. When he finished, he looked at her. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way, Rachel said quietly. There's always another way. Not one that gets them both. Not one that makes them pay for what they did. She looked at me, then back at Walsh. I'm doing this. Walsh nodded. Okay, we go at 7. My team will be in position by 6:30. Unmarked vehicles, plain clothes. You won't see them, but they'll be close. He left to coordinate with his team. Rachel and I sat in that plain room not talking. Just sitting. The wire on the table between us. Dad, she said finally. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you... She stopped. Started again. Do you hate me for what I put you through? The question caught me off guard. What number, Rachel? I let Mom pass away thinking I was gone. I let you pay all that money. I let Ivy grow up without... Stop. I moved my chair closer. You didn't do any of that. Connor did. Natalie did. They manipulated you. They used you. None of this is your fault. But I should have known. I should have checked. I should have... You were terrified. You thought you'd hurt someone. You trusted your husband to help you. I took her hand. Rachel, you were a victim. You still are. And what you're doing tonight, confronting them, getting justice that takes more courage than anything I've ever seen. She started crying, quiet tears running down her face. I'm proud of you, I said. And your mom would be proud of you too. She squeezed my hand. We sat like that for a long time. Then it was 6 o'clock. Time to go. Walsh came back with the wire, helped Rachel put it on, tested the signal. Clear as a bell. Remember, he said. Stay calm, get them talking, and if anything feels wrong, say the word. Rachel repeated. We'll be right outside. She nodded. I wanted to pull her into a hug. Tell her we'd find another way. Keep her safe. But I knew she needed to do this. Needed to face them. Needed to end 7 years of lies. I love you, I said. I love you too, Dad. 7 o'clock came too fast. Roger and I were in his car, parked 50 yards from the warehouse. Far enough that Connor and Natalie wouldn't notice. Close enough that we had a clear view of the side entrance. I had binoculars. Roger had a camera with a telephoto lens. And in my ear, a small earpiece connected to Walsh's frequency. I could hear everything Rachel heard. Everything her wire picked up. The waiting was terrible. Walsh's voice crackled through the earpiece. All units in position. Target vehicle not yet arrived. Stand by. I looked at the warehouse. One light in the upper window. Rachel was in there. Alone. Waiting. She'll be fine, Roger said, seeing my face. You don't know that. I know she's stronger than Connor thinks she is. I know she's got every cop in this county ready to move if she needs them. And I know she wants this. Roger lowered his camera. Richard, your daughter, spent 7 years thinking she was responsible for something terrible. Tonight, she becomes the one who brings them down. That's power. She needs this. I knew he was right. Didn't make the waiting easier. 8 o'clock passed. 8:15, 8:30. Maybe they're not coming, I said. They'll come. Connor's predictable. Comes to the warehouse every few days. He'll come. At 8:47, headlights turned onto East Industrial Avenue. Everything changes right here. The recording is live. Police are already in place. And my daughter is about to face the 2 people who shattered her life. Before we step inside that warehouse, let me know, are you still with me? Leave a comment with 1 word describing how you feel right now or the first thought that crossed your mind. One quick note before we continue, parts of what follows include dramatized elements used for storytelling and educational purposes. If that's not for you, it's okay to pause here. But if you're ready, let's continue. Silver sedan. That's them, Roger said, raising his camera. Through the binoculars, I watched the car pull into the warehouse lot. Park near the side entrance. 2 people got out. Connor, tall, clean-cut, wearing a jacket I'd probably paid for with my money. And Natalie. Dark hair. Confident walk. The woman who'd helped destroy my daughter's life. They walked to the entrance. Connor pulled out a key. Opened the door. He went inside first. Walsh's voice in my ear. Target 1 has entered. Target 2 following. All units hold position. Natalie disappeared through the doorway. I held my breath. Through the earpiece, I heard footsteps. The scrape of the door closing. Then Connor's voice. Casual. Almost cheerful. Rachel, I brought you a surprise tonight. More footsteps, lighter ones. Natalie's heels on concrete. A pause. Long enough that I started to worry something was wrong. Then Connor's voice again. But different this time. Confused. You're not surprised. Confessions don't always sound like regret. Sometimes they sound like pride. I held my breath as Rachel began to speak. Through the earpiece, her voice came through clear, calm, steadier than I expected. Connor, I know everything. A pause. Then Connor's voice, careful now. Know what? What are you talking about? I know Natalie's alive. I know she never, Rachel's voice caught, but she pushed through. I know you lied to me, both of you, for 7 years. Silence. Long enough that I gripped the binoculars tighter, ready to move. Then Natalie's voice. Cool. Almost curious. How did you find out? Roger grabbed my arm, held up his phone. Recording. Every word. Does it matter? Rachel said. You lied. You made me think I'd hurt someone. You kept me locked in here while you lived your lives. Connor's voice shifted. Harder now. Angry. You were supposed to stay hidden. Hidden from what the police aren't looking for me, are they? They never were. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Rachel's voice was stronger now. Tell me why. Why did you do this? Another pause. I could hear movement. Footsteps on concrete. Connor spoke. Because we needed the money. Just like that. No hesitation, no shame. Money, Rachel repeated. Your father's money, Natalie said. Matter of fact, like she was discussing grocery shopping. $40,000 a year, for 7 years. $280,000 total. I felt Roger's hand on my shoulder, keeping me in the car, keeping me from charging through that warehouse door. Oh, you did this for money. Rachel's voice cracked. You made me believe I was responsible for you. Let my mother pass away thinking I was gone for money. It wasn't personal, Rachel, Natalie said. Calm, cold. It was just business. Your father had money. We needed it. You were the way to get it. And my mother passed away from grief, and that wasn't part of the plan. Natalie's voice didn't change, didn't soften. But honestly, it worked out. Made the whole thing more believable. Your father was devastated. Never questioned anything. Roger had to physically hold me back. Wait! He hissed in my ear. Let them finish, Connor's voice again. We had it all worked out. The fight was fake. Natalie knew exactly how to fall, where to fall. We used theatrical makeup. Fake scenario. Made it look worse than it was. You manipulated me, Rachel said quietly. We gave you an option, Connor corrected. Prison or freedom. You chose freedom. You told me I'd hurt someone, and you believed it. Because you wanted to believe it. Because it gave you an excuse to disappear. Connor's voice was dismissive now. Careless. Come on, Rachel. Don't act like you're completely innocent here. You went along with everything. Because I was terrified. Because it was convenient. Natalie this time. You didn't have to work. Didn't have to take care of Ivy. Didn't have to be a wife or a mother or a daughter. You just had to hide. And we took care of everything else. I wanted to scream. Wanted to tell Rachel none of that was true. But I couldn't. Could only listen. How did you do it? Rachel asked. The accident. The funeral. All of it. Connor actually laughed. Gary, my cousin, works at the county morgue. Got us. He paused. Got us someone who'd passed. No family. No one to claim them. Made sure the documentation looked right. You used someone who'd passed away. Rachel's voice was horrified. The car accident did the rest. Fire destroys evidence. Makes identification impossible. Your father never questioned it. Why would he? His daughter was gone. And the urn, coffee grounds. Natalie sounded almost amused. And cinnamon, and some other spices. Your father kept that thing on his mantle for 7 years. Never opened it. Never checked. My hands were shaking. Roger's hand tightened on my shoulder. $280,000, Connor said. Paid for everything. This warehouse, Natalie's apartment, our trips, our life together. You've been together this whole time, Rachel said. Not a question, a statement. Since before you actually, Natalie said. Connor and I have been seeing each other for almost 10 years. You just didn't notice. And tomorrow, Rachel asked. You said something about tomorrow. Tomorrow we fly to Grand Cayman, Connor said. New life, new identities. We've got just over $60,000 in the offshore account. Enough to start fresh. What about Ivy? What about her? Connor's voice was cold. She's fine. Your father can keep paying. Or not. Doesn't matter to us. What, you're just going to abandon her? She's not my problem anymore. Silence. Then Rachel's voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Take me with you. Roger's head snapped up. We hadn't planned this. What? Connor sounded confused. Take me with you. To the Cayman Islands. Let me disappear for real this time. Why would we do that? Because I have nothing left here. Rachel's voice was breaking. Academy Award breaking. My father hates me. Ivy doesn't know who I am. I might as well start over too. Connor and Natalie didn't respond. I could hear them talking, whispering, too quiet for the wire to pick up clearly. Then Natalie's voice louder. We don't need her. She knows too much, Connor said. Everything. If she talks, then we make sure she doesn't talk. How? She comes with us, Connor said slowly. Or, the silence that followed made my blood run cold. Or what? Rachel's voice. Still calm. But I could hear the edge of fear creeping in. Connor's voice dropped to a whisper. But the wire picked it up. Clear as day. Or we make sure you never tell anyone. The moment I heard the threat, I moved. Through the earpiece, Connor's voice continued. Colder now. Final. Rachel, you're a liability. You always have been. Natalie's voice. We can't risk her talking. Then sounds. Movement. A sharp intake of breath. Rachel's voice no longer calm. Let go of me. I didn't think. Just reacted. The car door slammed open. I was out before Roger could stop me. Richard, wait. I didn't wait. Couldn't wait. My daughter was in there and they were threatening her, and 7 years of control snapped in that instant. Roger was behind me shouting into his radio. All units move in, go, go, go. I heard sirens, saw headlights, police vehicles converging from every direction. But I was already running. 50 yards felt like 50 miles. The warehouse door, side entrance. I hit it with my shoulder and it flew open. Inside, the scene froze for half a second. Connor gripping Rachel's arm. Rachel trying to pull away. Natalie standing near the exit keys in hand, ready to leave. All three of them turning toward me as the door crashed open. Get away from my daughter. The words came out raw, furious. Connor's hand dropped. Rachel stumbled backward. Then the warehouse exploded with sound and movement. Police hands up, police. Officers flooded through the door behind me. Black uniforms, vests, weapons drawn but pointed down. Professional, fast, overwhelming. Detective Walsh was first through. Connor Wallace, Natalie Hughes' hands where I can see them. Connor looked at the door, at the officers, at Walsh. His face went through about 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, panic, calculation. Then something like defiance. He bolted, tried to, anyway. Made it maybe 3 steps before Walsh moved. 1 second Connor was running. Next second he was face down on concrete with Walsh's knee on his back and handcuffs clicking into place. You have the right to remain silent, Walsh started. Natalie didn't run, just stood there, raised her hands slowly. Expression blank. No fear, no anger, nothing. Like getting arrested was mildly inconvenient instead of life-destroying. Another officer moved in, cuffed her, started reading rights. And Rachel was standing in the middle of it, all wire still hidden under her shirt, looking lost, looking free, looking terrified and relieved and broken all at once. I crossed the warehouse in 3 strides and pulled her into my arms. She collapsed against me, started crying, not quiet tears, full-on sobbing. 7 years of fear and guilt and isolation pouring out. It's over, I said into her hair. You're safe now. It's over. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. About everything. About Mom, about the money, about... We'll figure it out, I said. Held her tighter. Together. We'll figure it all out together. Behind us, officers were securing the scene, taking photos, collecting evidence. Walsh was on his radio coordinating with someone. Roger appeared at my shoulder camera, still in hand, looking satisfied. Connor was being lifted to his feet, still handcuffed, still trying to talk his way out of it. This is a mistake, he was saying, voice loud, insistent. We didn't do anything wrong, He looked at Rachel. She's lying. She's been lying for years. She's unstable. Everyone knows she's... Save it for your lawyer, Walsh interrupted. Connor Wallace, you're under arrest for fraud conspiracy to commit fraud, grand theft, identity theft, false imprisonment, and accessory to unlawful handling of human remains. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. This is ridiculous. We were helping her. She wanted to disappear. We gave her that option. Walsh just looked at him. We recorded everything, Mr. Wallace. Every word you said tonight. Every confession. Every threat. It's all on tape. Connor's face went white. What? The wire your wife was wearing. It recorded everything. Walsh held up a small device. Crystal clear audio. You admitting to staging the fight, faking Rachel's death, stealing from Richard Callahan, planning to flee the country, and threatening Rachel Callahan when she confronted you. Connor stared, then looked at Rachel. Really looked at her. Understanding dawned. You set us up. Rachel wiped her eyes, looked at him. And for the first time in 7 years, she looked strong. No, she said quietly. I just told the truth. 2 officers led Connor toward the door. As they passed, he twisted back. We would have gotten away with it. His voice cracked, almost desperate. We had it all planned. We were so close. Walsh shook his head. You were never close, Mr. Wallace. They took him outside, into one of the police vehicles. Doors closed. Sirens started. Natalie was already in another vehicle. Still silent. Still cold. Staring straight ahead like none of this mattered. Walsh turned to us. We'll need statements, from both of you. But we've got the primary evidence. The wire recording. Financial records Roger provided. It's solid. What happens now, I asked. There'll be a rain tomorrow. Bail will be high. Federal charges are likely wire fraud, money laundering. We're also picking up Gary Wells tonight, your cousin at the morgue, he added, looking at where Connor had been. Conspiracy, body theft, falsifying records. And Rachel, Walsh looked at her, gentle now. Ms. Callahan is a victim, not a suspect. We'll need her testimony, but she's not being charged with anything. She's free to go. 7 years. And she was finally free to go. Roger stepped forward, handed Walsh a folder. Financial records, bank statements, transfer receipts. Everything Richard paid over 7 years. $280,000. Walsh said, flipping through. We'll file for restitution as part of the sentencing. It'll take time, but you should get it back. I didn't care about the money, didn't care about any of it. Just cared that my daughter was standing next to me. Alive. Safe. Free. The police vehicles started pulling away. Lights flashing. Connor and Natalie inside. Headed to county lockup. To arraignment. To trial. To consequences they'd avoided for 7 years. Walsh shook my hand. Then Roger's, then Rachel's. You did good tonight, Miss Callahan. That took real courage. She nodded. Couldn't speak. Walsh left. Roger packed up his equipment. Said he'd meet me at the station tomorrow for statements. Gave me a quick hug, rare for Roger, and headed to his car. And then it was just Rachel and me, standing in that warehouse, in the place she'd called home for 7 years. Can we leave? She asked quietly. I don't want to be here anymore. Yeah, we can leave. I put my arm around her shoulders. We walked out together, past the makeshift bed, past the photos of Ivy on the wall, past 7 years of imprisonment. Outside, the night air was cool, clean, free. As the last police car disappeared into the night, I felt my daughter's hand slip into mine. We had a long road ahead. Legal proceedings, therapy, rebuilding, introducing Rachel to Ivy, explaining everything. But for the first time in 7 years, we'd walk it together. Justice isn't just a verdict, it's what comes after. The trial began 3 months later in January 2025. Those 3 months between the arrests and the trial passed in a blur of activity and emotion that I could barely process. There were endless police statements where I had to recount the same painful details over and over again. Meetings with prosecutors who asked questions I didn't always want to answer. Forms to sign, depositions to give. The legal machinery had started moving, and once it began, there was no stopping it. But more important than any of that were the therapy sessions for Rachel. She attended 3 times a week, at first working with a trauma specialist, who helped her understand that what happened to her wasn't her fault, that she had been manipulated and controlled, not complicit. Those sessions were slow, careful steps toward healing that couldn't be rushed, no matter how desperately I wanted her to feel whole again. We also had to navigate the delicate process of introducing Rachel to Ivy. It happened under supervision at first, with a child psychologist present to help Ivy understand that her mother hadn't abandoned her, that she'd been taken from her. The sessions lasted only an hour at a time, because that was all Ivy could handle. She was confused and cautious, asking questions that didn't have easy answers. Why did you leave? Where were you? Did you not want to be my mom? Each question broke Rachel's heart a little more, but Rachel remained patient and gentle throughout it all, terrified of pushing too hard and losing her daughter all over again. I stood in the middle of it all, trying to keep everyone steady while my own emotions threatened to pull me apart. Some nights I lay awake wondering if we'd ever truly recover from what Connor and Natalie had done to us. The trial was held at the federal courthouse downtown, a massive stone building with high ceilings and echoing halls that made every footstep sound important. It was the kind of place that reminded you how small individual lives were compared to the weight of the law. Walking through those doors each morning felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold rather than living my own. Connor Wallace was charged with an extensive list of crimes that the prosecutor read aloud during the opening statements. Fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, grand theft of $280,000, false imprisonment of Rachel Callahan, identity theft, accessory to the unlawful handling of human remains. Each charge represented a different piece of the nightmare he'd constructed around my family. Natalie Hughes faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, theft, and aiding false imprisonment. Her attorney tried to paint her as a victim of Connor's manipulation, but nobody in that courtroom was buying it. Gary Wells, Connor's cousin who worked at the county morgue, was charged with body theft, falsifying official records, and conspiracy. He looked small and defeated, sitting at the defense table, nothing like the confident accomplice Connor had described. All 3 pleaded not guilty, which surprised exactly no one. The prosecution appeared completely unconcerned by their pleas. They had the wire recording. They had Roger's investigation. They had 7 years of documented financial fraud. This wasn't a case they were worried about losing. I testified on the second day of the trial. I walked into the courtroom wearing the only suit I owned, the same charcoal gray one I had bought for Rachel's funeral 7 years earlier and had never worn again. Putting it on that morning felt like reopening an old wound. I sat in the witness box while the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen, asked me to tell my story in my own words. I told the jury about Rachel's supposed accident on Route 9, about how the police came to my door at 3 in the morning with news that shattered my world, about Gloria's grief that consumed her so completely she died within 6 months, about the urn that sat on my mantel for 7 years, a constant reminder of the daughter I thought I'd lost, about the $40,000 I sent Connor every January without question because I believed I was helping to raise my granddaughter, about discovering the coffee grounds and cinnamon inside that urn and realizing everything I'd believed was a lie, about finding my daughter alive inside a warehouse imprisoned by the very man who was supposed to love and protect her. The defense attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, tried to suggest during cross-examination that I had been careless, that I should have questioned things sooner, that I never verified where my money was going or demanded receipts, that somehow my trust and grief made me partially responsible for what had happened. He implied that a more vigilant grandfather would have discovered the truth years earlier and prevented all this suffering. The prosecutor shut that argument down quickly during redirect. She showed the jury 7 years of bank records with meticulous transfer receipts and written documentation of every single payment I'd made. She demonstrated that I had done exactly what any grieving father would have done when faced with the loss of his only child. I had trusted family. I had tried to protect my granddaughter. I had honored what I believed were my daughter's final wishes. There was nothing careless or negligent about grief. Rachel testified on the third day, and watching her walk to that stand was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I sat in the gallery as she moved through the courtroom with quiet dignity. She wore a simple blue dress we had picked out together during a shopping trip the week before, something modest and professional that wouldn't distract from her testimony. Her hair was longer now than it had been in the warehouse, healthier and fuller. She looked better overall, actually. Stronger. The hollowness had faded from her cheeks, and the dark circles under her eyes weren't as pronounced. But when she began to speak, when she placed her hand on that Bible and swore to tell the truth, her voice trembled with the weight of 7 years of trauma. She told them everything. About the staged fight with Natalie that night in her apartment. About being convinced she had seriously hurt her best friend. About the blood and the panic and the overwhelming guilt. About Connor telling her that Natalie was gone and that she would go to prison for what she'd done. About believing she had no choice but to disappear. About being locked inside that warehouse for 7 years with nothing but photos of the daughter she'd never see again. About the fear that never left her, the isolation that slowly drove her mad, and the guilt that never let her sleep peacefully. She spoke about missing Ivy's first steps because she was locked in a warehouse. About missing her first words, her first day of school, her first lost tooth. 7 years of her child's life stolen by people she had trusted completely. When she finished her testimony, the courtroom was completely silent. Even the judge looked moved. Connor's attorney tried during cross-examination to portray Rachel as a willing participant in the scheme, someone who had wanted to escape her responsibilities as a mother and wife, and had used the staged accident as an convenient excuse. He suggested she had known all along that Natalie was alive and had stayed in that warehouse voluntarily. The prosecution dismantled that claim during redirect by playing the wire recording. The jury heard Connor's voice admitting to staging the entire setup. They heard Natalie's calm, deliberate confession that it had all been about my money. They heard Connor and Natalie discussing their plans to flee the country. They heard the threats Connor made when Rachel finally confronted them with the truth. The jury heard everything, and there was no way to spin it into anything other than what it was, a calculated, cruel conspiracy. They also saw the physical evidence that had been meticulously cataloged and presented. The fake urn filled with coffee grounds and cinnamon sat on the evidence table, a brass monument to their deception. Bank records revealed offshore accounts that Connor had funded with my money. Surveillance footage showed Connor and Natalie together over the years, intimate and comfortable, while Rachel rotted in a warehouse believing she was a criminal. The falsified death certificate was entered into evidence showing how deeply the conspiracy had reached. Gary Wells testified after taking a plea deal, admitting in a shaking voice that he had provided unclaimed remains from the morgue in exchange for $5,000 in cash. Natalie's attorney made one last attempt to salvage her defense, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. That Natalie was just Connor's girlfriend and didn't fully understand the scope of his actions. That she had been manipulated too. The wire recording destroyed that argument completely. The jury heard Natalie's voice cold and precise and utterly devoid of remorse. It was just business, Rachel. Your father's money. There was no ambiguity there. No room for misunderstanding. The trial lasted 2 full weeks of testimony, evidence, and legal arguments that sometimes felt endless. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before reaching their verdict. On February 14th, Valentine's Day of all days, they returned to the courtroom and announced their decision. Guilty. On all counts. For all 3 defendants, the courtroom erupted in a chaos of emotion. Applause from the gallery, gasps from spectators, angry objections from Connor's attorney, who was already planning an appeal. The judge slammed his gavel repeatedly, calling for order, in a voice that echoed through those high ceilings. I took Rachel's hand and squeezed it tight. She was crying, tears streaming down her face in a mixture of relief and grief. So was I. 7 years of lies had finally been answered with truth. Sentencing came exactly 1 month later in March. Connor Wallace was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Natalie Hughes received 12 years. Gary Wells was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. All three were ordered to pay restitution, $280,000 to me for the money they had stolen, plus an additional $50,000 to Rachel for emotional damages and false imprisonment. Additionally, Connor's parental rights to Ivy were permanently terminated by family court. Legal custody was granted to me. Rachel would rebuild her relationship with Ivy gradually, with professional support and supervision, but legally Ivy was now mine to raise and protect. Connor said absolutely nothing as the sentence was read aloud. He just stared straight ahead, with blank eyes, perhaps finally understanding that his carefully constructed con had completely collapsed. Natalie looked bored, as if being sentenced to 12 years in prison was merely an inconvenience rather than a life-altering consequence. Gary cried openly, his shoulders shaking with sobs. They were led away in handcuffs and shackles. 15 years, 12 years, 5 years. Numbers that could never return what they had stolen from us, could never give Gloria back the years she lost, or return Ivy's childhood to Rachel. But at least those numbers meant accountability. At least they meant justice. Peace doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from choosing to heal. 6 months after the verdict in July 2025, I found myself standing at Gloria's grave with Rachel and Ivy on a quiet Sunday morning. 3 generations finally together in a way that should have happened years ago. The cemetery was peaceful, filled only with the gentle sound of birdsong drifting through the old oak trees and a soft breeze that rustled the leaves overhead. It was the kind of morning Gloria would have loved, warm, but not too hot, with sunlight filtering through the branches in golden streams. Gloria's headstone was simple and elegant, exactly what she would have wanted. White marble that gleamed in the morning light. Her name carved in graceful letters, the dates that bracketed a life cut too short. And beneath them, the words we had chosen together before she passed, beloved wife and mother. Forever in our hearts. Those words had felt hollow when we first carved them, platitudes that couldn't capture the enormity of our loss. But standing here now with Rachel alive beside me, they felt true again. Rachel knelt down carefully and placed fresh white roses at the base of the headstone, arranging them with gentle precision. White roses had always been Gloria's favorite flower. She used to grow them in our backyard, tending to them every evening after dinner, talking to them like they were old friends who could hear her secrets. Ivy stood beside me, her small hand wrapped tightly around mine, studying the stone with the kind of seriousness that children wear when they sense something important is happening, but don't fully understand what it means. Her eyes traced the letters of Gloria's name, sounding them out silently. "Grandpa," she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think Grandma knows that Mom's back?" I looked down at Rachel, who was still kneeling at the grave. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as one hand pressed against the cool marble like she was trying to feel her mother's presence through the stone. The sight made my own throat tighten with emotion. I think she knows," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I really do. I think she's been watching over all of us this whole time." We stood there in silence for what felt like a long time, but was probably only a few minutes. Sometimes silence is the only appropriate response to grief and gratitude existing in the same space. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice thick with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything that happened. For not being there when you needed me most. For letting you die thinking I was gone." She paused, struggling to find the right words. "I'm trying to be better now. Trying to be the daughter you raised, the mother Ivy deserves, the person Dad needs me to be. For Ivy. For Dad. For you." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "She'd be proud of you. I said firmly, needing her to believe it. Too, she'd be so proud of how hard you're fighting to rebuild your life and heal from what they did to you. I don't feel strong, Rachel whispered, leaning into me. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Strong people rarely do feel strong, I told her. Strength isn't about feeling invincible. It's about getting up every day even when you're scared and broken and doing the work anyway. Ivy tugged on my hand, drawing our attention. Can I talk to her? She asked, looking up at me with those big eyes that reminded me so much of Rachel at that age. Of course you can, sweetheart. Ivy stepped forward, standing directly in front of the headstone with her hands clasped in front of her, like she was preparing to give a speech. Hi, Grandma Gloria. I'm Ivy. I'm 7, almost 8 now. She smiled a little. Grandpa tells me stories about you all the time. About your chocolate chip cookies that were famous in the neighborhood. About how you used to sing really loud in the car, even though you couldn't sing very well, and it made everyone laugh. Her smile widened at that memory she'd only heard about, but never experienced. I wish I could have met you. I wish you were here to meet me. But Grandpa says you're watching us from heaven. So I hope you're happy up there. Because we're getting better down here. Mom's home now. And we're a family again, just like you would have wanted. I had to turn away, briefly, pressing my hand against my eyes as my chest tightened with emotion. The simplicity and honesty of children could cut right through you sometimes. After spending another quiet moment at the grave, we drove to Callahan Family Market together. The store had fully reopened 3 months earlier after we'd completed some renovations and repairs. Rachel worked the morning shift now, while I handled afternoons, a schedule that gave us both time with Ivy while teaching Rachel the business that had sustained our family for 35 years. Teaching her felt like reclaiming something precious that had been paused for too long, like picking up a conversation right where we'd left off. The response from our community had been nothing short of incredible. Customers came in regularly just to tell us they were glad we were back, glad Rachel was safe, glad our family had survived. Some brought casseroles or flowers, others simply offered quiet support. Mrs. Patterson still came every Tuesday for her tea. Old Joe Fletcher still bought his lottery tickets every Friday. But now they asked about Rachel, too, included her in their friendly small talk, made her feel like part of the neighborhood again. Business was actually better than it had been in years, sustained not just by commerce, but by genuine community care. We should really think about expanding, Rachel said as we unlocked the front door that morning. Maybe add a small cafe section in that empty corner. Serve coffee and fresh pastries. Create a gathering space where people can sit and talk. That would cost quite a bit of money. I said, though, I was already considering the possibilities. Why very so? We have some of the restitution funds available, she pointed out. It could be a smart investment in the business and the community. I looked at her, then really looked at her, and saw the spark in her eyes when she talked about the future. That spark had been absent for so long, I'd forgotten what it looked like. But it was back now, growing stronger every day. All right, I said, making the decision. Let's do it. Let's build something new. She smiled at me, wide and genuine and full of hope. Most of the restitution money had finally come through after months of legal wrangling. The full $280,000 plus the additional $50,000 awarded to Rachel. I'd already decided how to use it before the check even arrived. Half went into a college trust fund for Ivy, securing her educational future, no matter what happened. I gave $50,000 directly to Rachel to help her stabilize her new life and gain true independence. The remainder I donated to a women's shelter in Gloria's name, helping other women escape situations where they were controlled and imprisoned. The money certainly helped ease some practical concerns, but it wasn't what mattered most. Not even close. What mattered was that Rachel had her own apartment now, small but warm and entirely hers. What mattered was that Ivy had a corner in that apartment, filled with books and toys, and the security of knowing her mother wasn't going anywhere. What mattered was that therapy continued for both of them, helping them process trauma and rebuild trust. Healing wasn't linear or simple. Some days were harder than others, but it was happening gradually and genuinely. Connor and Natalie were in federal prison, now exactly where they belonged. Connor's appeal had been denied. No contact with Ivy was allowed under any circumstances. Honestly, I rarely thought about them anymore. They'd stolen enough of our time and energy. I refused to give them any more. We'd lost so much over these 7 years. Time we could never reclaim. Gloria, who should have been here to see her daughter come home. Pieces of ourselves that would never fully heal. But we were building something new from the wreckage they'd left behind. Forgiveness remained hard. Some days the anger resurfaced unexpectedly hot and bitter. Some days grief returned without warning, knocking the breath from my lungs. But I kept reminding myself that Rachel was a victim in all of this too. She had survived something unimaginable, and she had come back to us when she could have stayed broken. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It meant choosing love over bitterness, choosing hope over despair, choosing to move forward together rather than staying trapped in the past. That evening, Rachel and Ivy came over for dinner like they did every Sunday now. Sundays had become ours sacred family time that nothing was allowed to interrupt. I made spaghetti using Gloria's old recipe, the one written on a stained index card in her familiar handwriting. Ivy carefully set the table, placing each fork and napkin with concentrated precision. Rachel helped me with the sauce stirring while I added seasonings. For just a moment standing in that kitchen with the two of them, it felt remarkably close to the life we'd once known. After we finished eating, we moved to the living room and settled in together. Gloria's photo rested on the mantel now, right where the fake urn had sat for 7 years. Her smile looked down on us, and I much preferred having her image there, full of life and love, rather than what I'd believed were her ashes. Rachel said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Yes, thank you, for never giving up on me, for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I squeezed her hand gently. I never will give up on you. That's a promise. Ivy looked up from the book she'd been flipping through. Grandpa, can you tell me more stories about Grandma Gloria? I want to know everything about her. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. What do you want to know, sweetheart? Everything, she said simply. So I told her stories that night. About meeting Gloria at a county fair when we were both too young to know what love really meant. About our wedding day when it rained, but we danced anyway. About building this life together through joy and struggle and everything in between. Ivy listened with rapt attention. Rachel cried softly beside me, mourning the mother she'd lost and the years they'd missed together. She sounds amazing, Ivy said when I finished. She was, I agreed. She really was. As they prepared to leave that night, Ivy threw her arms around me in a tight hug. Love you, Grandpa. Love you too, sweetheart. Rachel smiled at me from the doorway. See you tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. sharp. I confirmed. I'll bring the coffee, she promised. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away into the summer evening, feeling something I hadn't felt in 7 long years, peace. Real, genuine peace that settled into my bones. Our life wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. It wasn't easy either. We still had hard days ahead of us, difficult conversations, painful memories to process. But we were together. Finally, truly together. And that was enough. 7 years of lies were behind us now. A lifetime of truth stretched out ahead. What stays with me now isn't the chaos or the anger. It's the quiet clarity that followed. Sitting at that table, watching my granddaughter laugh while my daughter smiled without fear, I finally understood this family story was never about getting even. It was about choosing what kind of man I wanted to be when everything was taken from me. And to you listening to this story, remember this. I spent years confusing silence with love. I believed patience meant endurance even when something deep inside told me something was wrong. Looking back, that was my mistake. If I could speak to my younger self, I'd tell him this: don't stay quiet just to avoid conflict. Ask questions sooner. Protect the people you love before damage becomes permanent. Please don't make the same choices I did. I've also had to face my own flaws. I wanted punishment. I wanted someone else to feel the pain I carried. But anger didn't heal my family. It nearly destroyed what was left of it. The moment I stepped back and trusted God once not to erase the past, but to guide my next step, everything shifted. I didn't gain satisfaction. I gained perspective. This chapter of Grandpa Stories taught me that strength isn't loud. It's measured. Family isn't defined by blood alone, but by responsibility and courage. That's why this family story matters to me. It's not dramatic. For the sake of drama, it reflects how easily love can be exploited and how hard it is to rebuild once trust is broken. Here's my belief now. Revenge fades quickly. Accountability lasts longer. Healing is slow, uncomfortable, and worth every step. These are the reasons I continue sharing Grandpa Stories, not to relive pain, but to pass on perspective earned the hard way. If this family story stayed with you, I invite you to leave a comment and share how it made you feel. Consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe if you'd like to follow more Grandpa Stories like this. Your support allows these stories to continue. Before you go, one gentle reminder. Upcoming stories may include dramatized elements created with the purpose of reflection and education. If that's not what you're looking for, feel free to step away and choose content that fits you better. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the very end.